The cost of living is on the rise again. Grocery prices have jumped by 21% since 2021. Over a 3.2% rise just in 2025, not including eggs. Economists are predicting another 3% increase in wake of the current trade wars. And at the top of the list of what could spike, coffee. The U.S. imports 80% of coffee that we drink. The grocery giant Publix may want to rethink changing its slogan to where shopping is a pleasure until you get to the cash register. Maybe Aldi is a better solution where the slogan is just my speed. Spend a little, live a lot. I'm personally trying to spend very little. However, others are going the other way and quickly stockpiling before the tariffs reach American soil. In recent weeks, retail has experienced an over 1% boost in consumer spending. Fortunately, unlike during the pandemic, toilet paper is still on the shelf. From being frugal to getting ahead, both strategies typically come from a place of fear. And as I have alluded to in recent weeks, making fear-based decisions is not a way to live. And one of the biggest fears that humanity has always had is the fear of not having enough money. This fear traps us in every aspect of life, not only in our spending and saving, but in how we navigate our careers and choices of work. The fearful mindset can cripple the best of us, which makes rising costs our biggest nightmare. But we've seen this script before. Hello, 2008. Hello, March 2020. We see you. The bottom falls out of the economy every few years with rising gas prices, inflation, recessions, bull to bear markets, real estate crashes, banks foreclosing, pandemics, you name it. The economic insecurity script is one of the most favorite topics of every single cable news outlet. We can easily say, but it's different this time. True, the news is always different, but don't be fooled. The strategy never changes. If we've seen the script before, then we know that there is nothing to fear. I had the opportunity to sit down with Hal Prather this week. He is the founder of Your Profit Pro, and he is a breath of fresh air on the topic of money. He's wise, a certified financial coach, and has practical advice on the best approaches to everyday spending habits. In our conversation, we talked about all the ways we think and act with money. Retirement, investing, emergency funds, groceries, online shopping, tax refunds, buying cars, financial independence, living simply with purpose, and being a cheerful giver. The trade war has an agenda that has global implications. We can speculate that the end of this war may be the beginning of the end of the U.S. dollar. Nevertheless, the dollar, as of today, still impacts all of us. We don't have to live in a state of fear, and we don't have to be trapped in career burnout. This is why I wanted to chat with Hal. He's an expert on budgeting, spending, and giving. No matter the financial situation, Hal has advice for all of us. I hope that you enjoyed this interview. We'll be right back. You are listening to the Work Life Eubiosis podcast with your host, Charleston Edwards. If this is your first time here, welcome. My goal is simple: to eradicate burnout and to bring harmony, purpose, and balance to this world, starting with the family. My hope is that this show and the stories shared will provide encouragement and ideas that will be valuable to you on your journey to work-life freedom. So let's dive in to today's episode. Hal, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you, Charleston. I appreciate you inviting me back. It's good to see you again.
Likewise. This is the third time you've been on the Work-Life Eubiosis, one as a Burning Ladder story and one as a guest. And my hope is that you will continue to be a reoccurring guest on this platform.
Oh, yeah. I always love our conversations. They're fantastic. A lot of fun.
Well, likewise. Well, today we're going to talk finances. As you know, one of the primary missions of Own Your 5 to 9 is to help people get out of burnout. And however, one of those barriers to getting out of burnout is finances. The dollar has a way of being a motivator behind a lot of our decisions, for good and for bad. So, I want to get into the tariff war today and what's happening globally and all the uncertainty that's happening in our economy, everything we're seeing in the headlines, and essentially help people find peace, have a peace of mind on how they are spending their money. And I'm included. I'm also looking to you for advice. So hopefully our conversation today can help other people find that peace of mind. But before we get into the practical tips, I want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. There's a tariff war going on. There's a lot of discussion on what the end goal is. If it's to break down and break China's economy, or if it's to sabotage America's own economy. Neither here nor there. We have a choice to either panic or to be patient as this war plays out. I'm not a futurist. I know you're not a futurist. But, is the agenda going to really bring back jobs to America? Are we going to be less dependent on imports? Is there hope when it comes to the finances in the economy of America?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to what you said earlier about we have two choices, basically, to panic or be patient. And I think, there's less hope if we panic, but there's definitely, if we're patient and prudent, I think there's all the hope in the world. Not to be the eternal optimist here, but we've seen many things play out, over time. And it sounds to me like we're just seeing another scene in the same movie that we've seen for years and years and years. I mean, I can think back to my just slightly preteen years, and we had extreme inflation going on. We had a really, really bad economy then. And then over my lifespan, we've weathered dot-com bubbles. We've weathered, highly overvalued NASDAQ and highly overvalued markets in that realm. We've had a dire housing crisis, right? We've had COVID. Yeah. And this is just while it is a little bit different in how it's manifested itself with the tariff war, a little bit different. I mean, that goes back last time we've seen something like this goes back well above or beyond our lifetimes. But it really is just a different scene, a different lever of how the markets are sort of being rocked. In this case, it's more of an emotional, I think more of an emotional thing, but there's definitely hope as long as we remain patient and prudent.
Yes. And you're absolutely right. There's nothing new under the sun. This is the 2025 version of an age-old movie that continues to play out every 2 or 3 years. With that being said, we are still highly emotional people. So why does money have such an emotional grip on us? And what perspective would you recommend that we have when it comes to our finances in a crisis?
I think why money has an emotional grip on us is really because money is we don't even realize it, I think, but money is us. Money is I don't want to say it's completely us, but it's an extension of who we are. So we get emotionally affected if family members are hurt, right? If ourselves get hurt, we get emotionally affected by that. Likewise, money is our energy. So our energy is being wounded, right? We spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of years, struggle, earning money, giving value back to the world, and them giving us that money back or value back in the way of money. And we, it's an effect on us because it's part of us. And when it comes to how we need to respond to that is just remember, think through how, I guess basically what I would say there is don't let the emotions, realize that it is a part of you, but we'll realize just as if you broke your leg, it would heal. Right. And if you've seen some damage to your bank accounts, whether it be through income struggles or whether it be through stock market struggles, just know that patience is going to win the day.
That's really a really good answer, Hal, and I had never thought about it in that perspective. And, as you're talking, I was thinking about this. If you look at someone's calendar, you can figure out their priorities. But if you look at someone's budget, you can also figure out someone's priorities. So you use the word value, right? So value may be money is an extension of our value, but we also reinvest our money back into our values.
Yes, exactly. And that when you look at a budget, I always like to say when we go through a spending plan and reviewing it and saying, am I really spending what is my life? Like if I look at my life outside of the financial realm, I look at my life, what I enjoy doing, what charities I enjoy giving to, wherever it may be that I'm spending money, does it fall into alignment with my financial, does my financial part of that fall into line with my overall life? Right.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue because one of the questions that I had lined up was about the supply chains being disrupted, very much in the tariff wars. It changes our strategies potentially on where we shop, right? If we're going to choose between big business or shopping local, shopping on Amazon or going downtown to a small business. Everyone's feeling the pinch here. So I guess what's your advice as you're making budgeting decisions or you're helping someone making budget decisions on maybe pivoting from where they even shop?
That's a really good question. And it's got some layers to it. I would say at the broadest level, like online shopping, let me kind of dissect it from there, because online shopping, we've kind of trained ourselves, or we've been trained, probably more likely, we've been trained to habitually shop online. And that can create a lot of needless spending. So it's one place to look out right out of the gate and say, do I really need, in some cases you can save money online. Absolutely. But in general, I would, we'll look at it from the standpoint of like, am I being intentional with my with my online shopping? Because that's what can get us a lot of times into trouble. So yeah, going down to it takes more friction to go down to your local market and buy something.
Right.
It takes more friction to go out of your way to say hello to Susan, Bob at the store versus click. 2 days later, it's at my doorstep. Right. So, whether, to the strategy kind of be to go to those smaller places. Well, in some cases, it might help you emotionally and in your relationships, and it might also help your bottom line.
What's cool, and I think you read this book as well, Arriving Today from Factory to Front Door. So we as a consumer can click one button to buy a USB charger or buy a power cord or purchase a phone or a new piece of tech, and you name it. Even toilet paper, you can buy it online and receive it today, especially in cities. And if you're more in the urban or outside of the city, 1 or 2 days. However, the production for a lot of our goods starts overseas, and it goes from ports to ships to various different transportation outlets, right, to get it. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing an upstream being disrupted right now because of the tariff war, and eventually those dominoes are going to fall all the way back down to our one click.
Yeah, they are. They absolutely are. Because right now, things that are like in in shipment, they're not necessarily going to be tariffed. But once those things start to hit American soil, and then new goods that came in afterwards, it wasn't something that was paused, for example, those are going to start to hit it, and we're going to see it, at those larger retail outlets.
Yes. So
there's also, real quick, I'd say that on the online shopping piece, it's not to fully discount online shopping, because I think there are ways you can actually, with prudence, you can actually save money online shopping, but it's the habitual habits that we've gotten into that concern me the most and that I see the most. There are other strategies. Well, I can talk more about those later. Strategies about, as we go to save money, how we might want to leverage online shopping to our benefit there. But just in general, think about it in the vast number of transactions you make. If it's a habit, can add up, and we need to switch to local from that standpoint.
Okay. Well, let's take a different angle, specifically around groceries, right? So I was just reading something yesterday that grocery prices have raised 21% over the last 4 years. And with that comes our grocery bills. And, if we're going to get groceries once or twice a week, that really starts to add up. And now, again, that there's, tax increases, and with everything happening with all the tariffs, we are now forced to making different decisions at the grocery store to save money. So, at what point do we stop going to Whole Foods or Publix and going somewhere else? And do we have to risk or compromise our health over quality?
Where to shop at the grocery store? Yeah, that's a big one. And there's a lot of space to be saved with grocery shopping. I can talk more. Speaking of online, we were just talking about online shopping. I mean, I can talk some ways in talking about groceries, ways we could save money even through online there. That might be actually a good use of online shopping. But in terms of like where to think about where you shop, I know you mentioned Publix, and Publix is, quite frankly, where shopping is a pleasure. Isn't that what they say? And my 2 cents is it's definitely where shopping is a pleasure. It's nice, better. It's got better lighting. People are very friendly. It's a fun place to shop. It's also a very expensive place to shop.
It's fun until you get to the cash register.
It's exactly right. Exactly right. And I mean, personal anecdote here, personal budget from our own budget, I'll share with you. My wife and I made a concerted effort about a year ago to really look at the grocery budget, right? We've kind of recently become semi-empty nesters, so it's primarily just us. I can definitely tell the months where my son is home from college, because we see the dollars go way up. But again, we had a concerted effort to cut back. One thing we looked at was, my wife loves to go to Aldi, right? She loves it. And, neither one of us really care much about shopping at Kroger. But if you shop at Kroger or Aldi and compare that to what we spend at Publix, not only percentage-wise when we look at a receipt, but I can also see it in our budget figures when we track expenses. I can actually see it in there, and I can see a 25 to 30% reduction based on if we're really conscious about where we shop. So basically, we've just offset those grocery prices rising 20-odd% since 2021. We basically offset that by just being conscious of where we shop.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're talking literally hundreds of dollars shaved out of our grocery budget just because we're being more conscious of where we shop. And going back to the online shopping piece, I mean, if you use something like, while I don't like to go to Kroger, definitely using something like Kroger Boost, the prices are great. You can get decent produce. It doesn't necessarily, I mean, we are conscious about, in our house, about, not buying junk type products. So we want these, you may pay a little bit more still for getting better products off the shelf and not just those Kroger store brands. But it's, when you do that, you're very aware of what your grocery list is and you're sticking to that grocery list. And that also adds to the bottom line savings that you receive. So that's a benefit of online shopping if you can apply that to groceries.
You're absolutely right. And for the record, this show is not sponsored by Aldi, but it is our primary place of shopping as well for all the reasons that you said. And one point that I do want to piggyback on is when you shop at Aldi, you should not be tied to brand names. And that's where Aldi has a competitive edge on being able to bring fewer brands to a shelf at the right price. So, you know, if you have something on your list, it's not always guaranteed to be on the shelf there, right? And you have to be prepared to be flexible on your list when really narrowing down your option to shop at Aldi.
Absolutely. And you said it's not sponsored by Aldi, but I'll give you the Aldi taco skillet. You get ground turkey with a little bit of salsa and some chips and some avocado, and you got fairly healthy meal feeding the whole family for less than $10.
That's right. And we're recording this on Tuesday, and tonight is Taco Tuesday at our house, sponsored by Aldi.
There you go.
This episode is brought to you by Own Your 5 to 9, an organization committed to freeing families of the rat race and burnout. Every organization has a leader, mission, and a set of values that drives the organization. But this is commonly missed in the most important organization in the world, the family. An organization has one mission for how it will impact the world. Why not the family? An organization goes into strategic planning routinely to align its values, mission, and projects. Why not the family? Whose Home, a strategic planning guide for families, is a workbook and a tool needed in all households. Whose Home takes a strategic planning approach with 10 guided exercises to define your core family values, family mission, and tools to operationalize how your family does life together. If your family is facing a big decision, Whose Home is for you. If you're considering a career pivot, Whose Home is also for you. If you desire more intentionality and harmony in your home, Whose Home is for you. Create a healthy culture, not a hustle culture, at home. Visit ownyour5to9.com to claim your copy today. All right, let's shift gears out of the daily spending to more into big moves and big spending. Is this the right time to buy a house, purchase a car, make a huge move, or even making big moves in the stock market or retirement accounts?
Buying a house, buying a car. Wow. Well, I would say, first off, it's never the right time to buy a car. I will admit I have a full-on bias for cars to the negative, just because I've seen they're like the number one budget wrecker of anything, because they're just a huge asset that declines in value, right? They're a need that needs to get us from point A to point B. Sorry for all the car nuts out there. My dad was a huge car nut. I understand it. And I'm not trying to dog too much on cars, but I am saying that be careful, because buying too much car until you have a certain level of wealth can really hold you back because of the declining value of a car, huge car payments especially if you take on debt for it. So yeah, just be careful with cars this time or any time is my 2 cents there. In terms of a house, this is probably from what I've seen, one of the hardest markets to buy a house in. It's just not, and people will say, well, houses are good assets to build wealth over time. I've almost, in my way of looking at a house, has kind of changed a little bit in the past few years, is looking at it almost like a liability. Just if you're not careful. And I say that because I used to hear a lot in crisis counseling situations, particularly like housing foreclosure type situations. People would tell me how we were doing, a couple would come in, how we were doing fine until we bought the house. And the problem was it was low percentages put down on a house. So we're talking, 3%, something like 3 to 5%. And then never accounting for what you have to do when you buy a house. Because when it comes to buying a house, one thing we need to make sure we're accounting for I don't know if you've ever heard of the figures of like what people should set aside for upkeep on their houses, but basically every $100,000, just put 1% aside. So if you have a $300,000 house, a $500,000 house, you want to be putting aside $3,000 to $5,000 every year just in maintenance, right? I mean, just today, we're putting new carpet in our house, right? I think that's something that, cost a couple of $1,000s to do, but it wasn't a surprise when we did it. I don't know. Was it 10, 12, 15 years ago? I don't remember the exact date. It was 10 plus years ago when we did it. You just have to realize $400 a year for my flooring, right? If I have carpets, right? Or if I need to refinish the wood floors or whatever it might be, hot water heater. Things go, things happen with houses, and particularly with an older house, you may want to even bump that percentage up even higher to like 3 or 4% per year on the value of your house.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. If you are going into a house with higher interest rates now, because they're much higher than they were a while back, 12, 18 months ago, let's say, you need to be accounting for those additional things that you don't have to take into account if you're simply renting.
You just brought up a point because we're having real-time experiences as well. It just in 2025, we had a hot water tank that just went out, and that was a not foreseen expense, followed by a few other surprise expenses. But, if we had the discussion in advance coming into 2025, knowing that we had set aside money just for emergency house incidents or maintenance, cleaning out the gutters or painting this or replacing wood, then it changes the emotion. It changes the reaction when you know it's already set aside and you're budgeting for it, as opposed to for not budgeting for it and it happens and all of a sudden you're stressed and you're having to compromise somewhere else.
And to what you said there, if you go into it with that mindset of putting the money aside throughout time, then if you ever do run into any sort of struggle, you may look into your budget and say, well, I've got $3,000 in my, home maintenance category. If you do need to pull some money from that, because it may grow to be a sizable amount over time if you're lucky enough to have nothing go wrong, right? Then at least you realize the trade-off. When you do need to pull that money for something else, you go, okay, I realize that we're quote unquote stealing from home maintenance to take care of, a medical bill or whatever, but at least you see the trade-off. So I think what you said there is huge, and it's a large part of it, but is laying it all out and planning ahead.
Yep. And understanding that the emergency fund, or however you label that fund, it has a use. It's not just sit there to stockpile. It has a use. And it should have, those sub-bullet points of all the things that could happen, from medical to house to, whatever emergency shows up, it hits there.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times I love this breaking it out that way. You said sub-bullet points. And a lot of times in coaching, I will see someone have the word, that's my emergency fund. And I like to guide them through, well, what is an emergency?
Mm.
Is it your house? Is it your car? Is it, is it for income loss? I mean, having being very specific about what those emergency funds are. When you do that, I think you get even further clarity into, it's a piece that comes with knowing each. It's not just, I've got $15,000 in my emergency fund. No, maybe it's $5,000 for home repairs, $2,500 for car repairs. And on down the line. I know my expenses average $4,000 a month, so I've got $12,000 in my income replacement fund. Laying it out that way and being specific really helps.
So let's just say someone's listening. They're currently drawing down on their emergency fund, right? Here in 2025, when everything is skyrocketing, as prices skyrocketing, your emergency fund is going down. Can you provide some strategies, to reduce everyday expenses on top of what you've already mentioned, plus ways that you can actually put money back into the emergency fund?
Oh, wow. I mean, if are you describing there that someone's like not making enough income in that regard, or?
It's, I would say someone that is maxed out of budget. Every dollar has a place to go except the emergency fund. But at some point after the emergencies end, they want to restock the emergency fund. So how to reduce expenses and raise the savings so that the savings are going back into a rainy day fund.
Got it. I mean, to me, what you're sort of looking at there then is kind of what can you reduce? Are there ways you can strategically reduce to then build back up? Right. Let's say outside of another income and sort of diversifying your income streams. But yeah, there are some key ways. And that, going back to the house car thing quick, keep in mind when we're talking about houses and cars, those are the rocks of your budget, right? So when you get a car payment or you get a house payment, a mortgage payment, or you have rent, those are kind of factors you can't play with. You can't reduce them. So don't become house poor. Don't take on more rent than you can take on, because it's going to eat into other things that that you could positively affect. But that being said, so that's just strategy number one, is just keep those, realize as a percentage of your budget what those comprise. And then outside of that, it comes down to, I think, subscriptions are a huge one, particularly in today's environment. And I always recommend that we list out in our budget, don't have a category for subscriptions, but have a category for every last one of them. Because then you see where the dial can be moved. I mean, things like in today's world with cable TV, right? People say, "Oh, I've cut the cord." Well, now these, YouTube TVs and Fubo TVs and all those, their prices have continued to rise. And are we really watching all of those channels?
Amazon will get you. I've actually had to be very intentional on going back into the Amazon account and seeing how many apps within the Amazon are getting charged, because you do not, once you subscribe to, hey, I'm going to get 7 days of this particular app on Amazon Prime, and then you never get an alert that you're getting charged, and that continues to add up.
Yes, it does. It does. And you're exactly right. And that's a place where it's kind of hidden. Same thing with, if you have like an iOS device, or a lot of those will have, it's being billed through there. I don't even see it. And you go ahead and look in your settings and look at subscriptions, go $7.99 a month, $8.99 a month. And you start to get some sizable, you could have $150, $200 coming out of subscriptions and not even realize it. That's not uncommon. So that's a great way to just extract some value right back into your budget. For example, now the piecemeal thing can be a benefit though for those cord cutters, because if you've got a subscription like YouTube TV and you say to yourself, well, am I really watching every one of those channels, of which I can guarantee you ESPN is 50% of that bill? Can you get some, like, for example, with sports, I cannot live without my Atlanta Braves. I love my Atlanta Braves. But if I'm paying it used to be just one way to get my Braves and be able to watch them, right? And that was through something like Fubo TV. And then to realize, gosh, that cost a lot of money per month. And then I have to also add on the regional sports package. Maybe I could just cancel that and just go to now the FanDuel package. And that's going to save me just like $80 a month. And do I really care that I can't watch this news channel or HGTV no, there's other things for that. And I just, all in all, I netted out probably a $60 savings, just figuring that out.
That's awesome.
And getting off the sofa too. I just get to watch the Braves and don't have to sit in the sofa for anything else.
You had mentioned earlier about diversifying revenue. So we've talked about, reducing expenses, but, at what point do we entertain getting a second job or taking up gig work or just something else coming in besides the day job revenue?
Yeah, I think, I always like to look at look at someone's savings rate to sort of see where that is. If their goal is to reach financial freedom, it all depends on their goals pretty much. But generally speaking, if you can keep that, 15 to 20, I'd get aggressive and say 20% savings rate. But if you can be putting aside, 20% of your income into a savings vehicle, whether it be a taxable brokerage or your Roth or your regular IRA, whatever it might be. If you can hit that, then you're doing well, right? But if you're getting below that and your goals are, hey, I want to get to financial freedom faster. I want to build a nest egg so that one part of my diversified income stream is dividend income or something like that. Then yeah, you got to be saving at a stronger pace. And that's kind of where you can know that, gosh, if I just put 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week more, and I wasn't going to be sacrificing family time, that I could put in time now for a 2 or 3 year future out where I can scale it back again.
You just brought up something we had started to touch on earlier, which is around retirement accounts, IRAs, Roths. Just knowing the stock market is currently on a roller coaster ride with all that's happening in our politics. Any high level advice on how we treat our retirement accounts now? Is it a time to invest? Is it a time to pull out? What fundamental strategy would you recommend for dealing with the stock market in general?
Stay the course. Don't do the course. Don't move. Don't blink. Don't move. I think it can be this moments like this in the market can be a great time for us to reflect and ask ourselves, are we diversified enough in our portfolios? Like, for example, this is actually the first time in my own life that I've actually gotten, not worried is not the word, but I've actually reflected on, I'm closer to retirement than I have ever been. Right? Mm-hmm. When it happened, when I was 30 years old, 35, 40, 45, 50 years old, I just keep investing. Didn't even care that the market was down 10% or whatever, right? Didn't need 15%. COVID happened. Didn't care. I'm still years out from retirement. And quite frankly, hopefully I still am years out from retirement because I want to continue to work and add value to others' lives. But I do realize that the pace of work for me is slower than it has ever been. And then that led me to go, okay, is my portfolio diversified enough? Like I would be mostly all stocks going full tilt. And I'm not going to make any changes in that personally. Would hope that most people would not make any changes because you're selling when things are down, right? And that's just not a good move.
Right.
So if you can just stay the course, what your plan was going into this, just ride it through. Maybe I don't know if we're talking 18 months, 24 months, but maybe then it's time to look if things go back up. I'm not in the market timing, right? I don't want people to time the market. But then if things have recovered somewhat to where you feel more comfortable, and you see some of those losses gone, then you can reflect on, okay, maybe my asset allocation needs to change a good bit. That's where I am personally. Maybe I need to change it around just a little bit and not be so foot on the gas, right? And that's what this moment in time has done for me personally. And I also would say when it comes to your asset allocation, that's going to be between you and your financial advisor. But a lot of people are used to looking at like, 80-20, 60-40, whether it's equities and fixed income. Think about if you had no income, quote unquote, earned income coming in, if you were living off your nest egg, instead of looking at it as an allocation, look at it in terms of how many years do you have in safe assets like bonds, CDs, savings accounts, cash, right? What do you have in that regard? And then back into your asset allocation that way. So whether you wind up 70-30, 60-40, 80-20 is all going to be based on what your income needs are as you get into financial freedom, or retirement.
Yep.
Definitely not changing now being in the market is so much better than timing the market because, the stock market's going to go up. If you look at the average, you look at it daily, it's like 53% of days it's up, right? If you look at it quarterly, it's almost 70% of the time it's up. If you look at it yearly, like I think it's close to 80% of the time it's up, something like that, right? And if you look at it in 5-year spans, you're down to like 88% of the time you're going to win. So you got to take the long approach.
You're raising a point that that I really want to drive home of worry, right? If the market is up 80% of the time, why worry when it's down 20% of the time during the year? We're getting stressed for no reason or something that usually plays out in the long run.
Yeah.
Just last night, and I'm going to throw you a curveball. I was at a Bible study and we were in 1 Timothy 5, and the word retirement came up because Paul was given instruction to Timothy about the roles of the church in their dealing with the elderly and what was an elderly person and how we would take care of widows who are old. And one of the guys in the Bible study brought up the point of in different cultures, retirement looks different. So in other cultures, and not all cultures, but in other cultures, the retirement plan is the kids. That if you have children and grandchildren that are now in the workforce, that, hey, according to 1 Timothy 5, it's up to the kids and the grandkids to now take care of us people that can't work anymore after 60, 65. So what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, wow. I had a pastor one time. He was, I would think now, I believe he's almost in his early 90s, but this was probably 10 years ago. So he was easily in his early 80s then. And he was a interim pastor, and he and his wife literally traveled the country as interim pastors within churches that were going through transition. And he literally said, man, retirement's not biblical. He fully believed in always doing something, whether it was part-time work. And that opened my eyes to like, yeah, what is retirement? What does the word even mean?
Right.
Is it retiring from our primary vocation that we studied for and spent years building skills in? What does it mean to a career changer? They're retiring from something, but they're just switching where they go, right? So like, for example, the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. I like, I think it was, I forgot who it was that was saying they were coming up with their listeners, on a way to rebrand that. And they came up with the term FINE, FINE, instead of FIRE, financial independence next endeavor, right? So it's almost like, yes, financial independence is wonderful. And it's a wonderful goal to strive towards, because then I think you can really go to a higher plane of between what your belief is and what you're being called to do, and not be stuck in something that you have to do. So I'm a firm believer in each individual's ability to build financial independence. But the retire piece, yeah, I almost think, outside of being hurt and not able to physically work or mentally being able to work, we should always be. I don't know if that was exactly your question, but that's my thoughts on retirement.
Well, Jared, you nailed it. I love the FINE movement, the next endeavor, because from a bigger picture, it points back to purpose. And I feel like if we are living out our design purpose, that will always be more fulfilling than whatever material rewards or monetary rewards that await us on this side of heaven, right? So that fulfillment is actually in our endeavors and doing that on purpose, for a purpose.
Right.
No matter the age.
Right. No matter the age.
Yep. All right. I'm going to take one more left turn, and because we're recording on April 15th. So today is, the deadline for taxes. Some of us may be getting a refund. Some of us may be paying money back to the man. And I want to ask a question more about for those that are receiving a refund. How do you advise people getting back a significant refund? What should they do with those funds?
Well, I think for anybody getting back a refund, here's the problem. They've probably already thought through what they want to do with that money. And that's because we all do something called mental accounting, right? What I mean by that is like, we tend to think where the money comes from should dictate what it is we want it to do. And I think that's it's a very human thing to do, but it's also a false way of looking at it, right? Because we say, if you earned $100, you're going to be very you're going to think differently about what that $100 needs to do than if I gave you $100 or you found it on the street.
Mm-hmm.
You found it on the street, you and Kelly are going to dinner somewhere, right? But if you worked hard on it, you'd be like, well, we're going to need some groceries and I probably need, you would think differently. And that's what we do with our tax refunds. We do this mental accounting. So my advice because everybody's situation is going to be different, is to try to exercise, throwing that mental accounting out the way and look in terms of your budget overall and say, hey, I just got some new money, quote unquote. It's money that the government had from me for a year or over the last year, but now I've got it reset into my budget. And what does this money need to do until I'm paid again? So you're going back to asking yourself, I've got $2,000 tax refund. I know I'm going to get paid again on April 30th or May 15th or whatever. You get paid monthly. But what does it need to do until I'm paid again? That's the question to ask yourself. And that could be, hot water heater went out. I've got and I didn't have an emergency fund set up for home maintenance. So now I've got to cover that hot water heater. It could be, I'm making great progress on paying down my mortgage. That's what I want to do. That's where the money goes. Just looking at your envelopes or your categories in your budget and figuring out where that money needs to go until you get paid again. That's the advice I would give someone.
Thank you for that insight. You're so right. I'm already thinking about my refund, and you just told me ways to go deeper. So thank you. I have one last question, and this comes back to, we've been talking about saving money and putting away money in retirement and how to spend, but we haven't talked about giving, right? Is this a time to be less generous? Or is there ever a time to be less generous?
No, I think everything we receive it doesn't come from us, right? So everything we receive is coming from the Lord himself. So, when it comes time to doing that, I just look at percentages. If your income is down, right? Well, then, okay, your income's down. So if you're tithing or you're looking at a percentage of your income for giving to your local church or giving to a charity, maybe you need to make some adjustments. But no, I wouldn't say flat out just looking at your giving as a line item and like slashing it. That's the way I look at it. Because I believe that we're called to be as generous as we can with our time and our money, right? Time and talents. So, if you've got that income coming in, if your income hasn't changed, then no, I wouldn't say that's the way I would approach it. Don't, if you believe in that, then do not consider becoming less generous.
Well, those are wise words. We should always be generous because we can't take it with us, right?
Exactly. It's we never had it in the first place. We've been gifted it. It's ours to steward. So, well,
Hal, you are always full of wisdom when it comes to just life in general, and especially when it comes to finances. So, if anyone wants to know more about what you do, if they want to schedule you for consulting or whatnot, how do they find you?
So they can find me at my website, which is yourprofitpro.com. They can also reach me at hal@yourprofitpro.com. Not on the socials, but I do have the website there. But yeah, you can come and you can sign up for my newsletter. I do have a course to help you begin thinking through your money, or we can engage in one-on-one coaching as well. Those are some of the services that I've offered, and I've really had a great time of late teaching high schoolers about financial concepts and helping them learn about ways that they think about money, how they relate to money, how they vocationally can earn money, and think about careers, how they steward money, how they can grow their money, and how they protect money and then build financial freedom. So it's been this fun course that just kind of came about from some moms asking me if I would ever teach it, and it's been one of the foundational aspects of what I've been doing lately. So really enjoy that as well.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I appreciate your contributions to this show, and we look forward to having you back very soon.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. You do the same. Thank Thank you for listening to the Work-Life Eubiosis podcast, part of the work-life resources created by Own Your 5 to 9. I hope that you have found encouragement and a few ideas to strengthen your journey to purpose, freedom, and balance. Have you overcome burnout and found a new way of life? Millions around the globe are still at the risk of burnout and losing it all. And your story may be the one that sparks not only a dream, but action. Visit ownyour5to9.com for more information and submit your story. While you're there, join the Work-Life Eubiosis newsletter and receive additional resources weekly right to your inbox. If you enjoy this podcast, take time to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Share it with a friend or loved one. Remember, the most important organization in the world is the family. Let's do our part to strengthen it. Thank you for listening.